This is the Boss DS1, and you've probably seen one before. Boss started making these in 1978 and haven't stopped since, making this not only the longest production run pedal in history, but also the best selling. We don't have current numbers, but put it this way, in 2007, Boss were celebrating selling 10 million of these little orange boxes. And they've been used by some big names over the years. Steve Vai.
This DS1 has been sort of like a workhorse in my entire career. I've used this pedal, and it's really hairy. It's a hairy pedal.
Kurt Cobain, Joe Satriani, to name just a few. In fact, Satch has a collection of DS1s.
If anybody out there, if you've collected these things, you know that every single one's different. So I had about 25 of these things. I have way too many, I don't like to collect gear, so having 25 of one pedal when I really only use 2 for an entire tour, seemed a little excessive.
One of the biggest selling points about this pedal is availability. They are everywhere. So if you can make one sound good, you can get your sound whether you're in Indiana or India. Now I think this little guy deserves a lot of respect, but sadly not everyone agrees. There seems to be a little bit of snobbery in the guitar pedal world, and when it comes to a mass-produced, cheaply priced, and easy to get your hands on pedal like this, well, that just doesn't tick any of their boxes. The air of exclusivity with this demographic is a big seller, and this doesn't have any of that. I'm talking about the guys who would spend $5 on a pedal because of its supposed tone. So it got me thinking, how can we make this pedal appeal to that market so it finally gets its recognition that it deserves? Well, I think we should start by finding out what pedals cost $5 and why they do. The Klon Centaur is a mythical pedal, and it's become a favourite on YouTube. One of those babies in your thumbnail is almost guaranteed views. They were made in the 1990s by a man named Bill Finnegan. He didn't like the sound of the Ibanez Tube Screamer and wanted to create an alternative. So he and an MIT engineer created the Klon circuit. This circuit was shrouded in mystery for years after the pedal was discontinued because it was coated in epoxy to obscure it. Eventually it was figured out, but the debate still rages on, as does the mystery as to what components were really used. With only approximately 8,000 of these pedals made, they've got the exclusivity factor. This is only amplified by the different colour variations of the pedal. There were gold and silver with the Centaur decal on them, and there were gold and silver with just the Klon lettering. And even though the circuitry is the same on the inside, these variations also vary in price on the second-hand market. The gold ones always go for more, and if they've got the Centaur decal on them, they go for even more again. But even at its cheapest, we're still talking thousands upon thousands of dollars. Right now they're going for insane prices, but these prices jumped up since just last year by thousands. So I think we've figured out what our target demographic want. They like exclusivity, limited numbers, mystery in what components are used, and a nice paint job. I think we can do that. This is a replica Klon housing, and it's quite difficult to find without components of a kit, and definitely not cheap. Put it this way, it's cheaper to buy just one of these, and it's most certainly the most amount of money I've spent on an empty box. But it's not going to be empty for long. I'm hoping to put this into this, and I'm hoping for not too many modifications, although I know there will be a few, but we'll see how it goes. But first, I think we need to give it a nice paint job. As far as colours go, we're not too off. It's pretty close, especially for a can of Volkswagen Brilliant Orange. There's a few small finish imperfections, but you know what we call that? We call that exclusivity. Okay, update so far. It does fit in just. I've extended with really bad solder joints these ribbon cables that go to the pots that are under the board right now. It still needs a foot switch. And I also wanted to take this power jack off the board and extend it over to the input, but it's glued in, and I know that's going to be a pain to remove. So instead of breaking it, I think we're just going to run it off the battery. It'll be a miracle if it works, but miracles happen. Right, so we're about 2 months after the last bit of footage you saw, and we haven't come a very long way since. The pedal really just looks like an orange Klon with DS1 knobs. Not really what I was going for. It's got the DS1 circuit inside, but this is about visuals as well. So there's a few things that I've been working to try and get to make it a bit more DS1-ish. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take the rubber foot pad that came off the original DS1, and I want to figure out a way to get it to fit over the foot switch that's there. So I'm probably going to have to cut a hole in it for it to stick through, but I think if I do that, it already looks much more like a DS1. Then for the finishing touches, it needs some text. So I have this. I did have a lot more. I had the volume, or the volume distortion tone, and I had the ins and outs and the check light, but because the text was so small, it did rip. So this was the smallest I could get it, which is still bigger than any of the others should be, but it works for just the logo on the pedal. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and wild ones of all ages, I give to you the world's first and only Boss Klon DS1 Centaur. Now admittedly, it's not as pristine as it could be, but it does what it set out to do. It's the only one in existence. It's rare. It's got random parts, and I don't know what this cable is, but I put it in there. And even with the finish flaws and imperfections, I still think this looks pretty cool. So yeah, now tone demo, I suppose. Now in the recording it does sound a little bit more like a fuzz pedal than a distortion pedal, but I would attribute that to a high output pickup in the guitar I was using to record. And the reason I think that is because when I rolled down the volume, providing less input into the pedal, it was sounding much more like a distortion. And normally I'm not a big fan of fuzz pedals, but in the case of this video, I see this as an absolute win. The reason? The Boss Tone Bender, a fuzz pedal that was very limited in its numbers and wasn't cheap to begin with. I'd anticipate when these are resold, someone is going to probably add a zero to the original price. So if this video does one thing, maybe it'll inspire you to find that old DS1 that you've got somewhere in a drawer. If you're a guitar player, you probably know somebody who has a Boss DS1. There's millions of them. So give it a chance and see if it works for you. This video isn't sponsored, by the way. I wish it was. Like the video so I can feel justified in spending a ridiculous amount of money in just this. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.